Hollow Knight Song of the Silk is finally here, and as I'm sure you guessed by now with all the spitter and spatter over the internet, it is peak. And now that we're over the phase of Hollow Knight 2 is real and Silksong before GTA 6, it's time to get down to business. The kingdom is dead, bugs are fuel, and the citadel is full. Firstly, this video will remain completely spoiler free, but with a game like Silksong, pretty much anything can be considered a spoiler with bosses, abilities, locations, and the story obviously. But here, I try to mostly just discuss the basic surface level mechanics and systems, so if you were worried, don't be, you're safe with me. When I first dived into the game with my controller in one hand, popcorn in the other, and high expectations holding my head up high, I tried to not think of it as Hollow Knight 2 and more as its own thing, just so that I wouldn't be comparing it to the first game during every moment of my playthrough. But the more I played, the more I did continue comparing it to Hollow Knight, but only for how much more refined and improved everything feels. And that's not to say that I believe Silksong is definitively better and superior to Hollow Knight, but it's clear that Team Cherry has definitely learnt a few new things over their time developing Hollow Knight. Now, I'll have to say, I haven't beaten the game yet. Hell, I haven't even gotten very far. But for this video, I really wanted to share my thoughts and opinions, and just to have an excuse to show my love for this game and the first one. Alright, enough blabbering on. Let's begin picking apart Silksong with the 4 pillars of video gaming: story, gameplay, visuals, and sound. Starting with the story. I think it's important to start off by saying that even though I'm pretty sure Silksong is a consecutive sequel to Hollow Knight rather than a prequel or something, you do not need to play the first game to understand everything in Silksong, even though I would definitely recommend it if you haven't already. I don't know, it's pretty good. Now, other than the fact that Hornet gets taken into the... yeah, the story's good. What'd you expect? But seriously, starting out as just a DLC for the first game, and then expanding into something this huge, there was definitely a lot of ways that they could have taken it. But I think what they landed on here was as perfect as it could have been. It shares a lot of similarities with the first game, especially when it comes to gameplay, when we get to that. But that's not at all a negative take for the game. I don't know whether it was just because I was more locked in during this playthrough, or in the way that progression is laid out, but in Silksong, I understood much more of the story early on through the world building and NPC's dialogue, much more than I did in Hollow Knight. In the first game, the story was always given to you in sort of a puzzle type of way. Every new landmark or NPC you would come across would give little notes and tidbits of what was going on, like every new bit of info was a torn piece of paper and your job was to glue them all together, and once you got the full page, it was on to finding the next one. This type of story progression keeps up the mystery of everything all throughout your playthrough, but in Silksong, while there is still some mystery in everything just from being in a strange land, the game tells you a lot more of what's really going on. Heck, the first NPC you meet literally gives you your first main objective for the game. But this slight difference in the story nuances feels like a natural continuation with how it complements each character's personalities. In Hollow Knight, you're almost a nobody. You're a mute, short king with no memory. And the story continues with that sentiment. But in Silksong, playing as Hornet, you're a skilled hunter. You might be in an unfamiliar place, but you at least have more of a recollection on what to do and where to go. And I mean, you even get your own voice lines now, letting Hornet actually ask the locals what's going on. And I'm going to stop rambling, but it's just like everything else.
La fenu venido.
Now we're jumping right into the meat and potatoes. First off, the combat. This is probably where there's been the most changes. The way you flip and float off of every attack is so satisfying, and everything feels so fluid with some of the cleanest animations I've seen in a while. Parkour and movement as a whole feels much more refined with the added mantle when getting close to the edge of a surface, which makes parkour both less punishing and a lot smoother. You can attack upwards, side to side, but the real kicker is zero downward attack whatsoever. Instead, it's been replaced with diagonal downward lunges. And if you want my short answer, this is the simplest yet greatest mechanic they could have made to this game. Not only making Hornet feel unique to play, but also allowing sometimes the least mechanically complex interactions to feel like I'm hitting an Ultrakill like switching, hitting, explosive combo deluxe on them. I have a little fun with it. Now, one thing that might not be very obvious to those who have already played Hollow Knight is the increased difficulty. More enemies deal 2 masks of damage much sooner and more often than the first, and these new enemies also bring with them completely unique attack patterns, most of which being a fairly large far cry from the dull and simple creatures from the first. In fact, from my experience, there isn't a single enemy in Silksong that was in the first game. Everything is completely new. But again, for experienced players, these usually aren't an issue, and with Hornet's new movesets and mechanics, the enemies complement this new playstyle greatly. But for newer players who are unfamiliar with the combat loop, Silksong is going to be much more difficult than Hollow Knight. Just something I thought I would point out. As for progression and exploration, this is again where most of the differences lie. Of course, with every location and area being completely new, it's incredibly interesting learning the new maps with all new scenery, especially after being so accustomed to the first. And being a Metroidvania, it's got all the Metroidvania stuff going on. Yeah, you know, I don't need to explain all that. Cash is now set in these little beads rather than geo and is a lot harder to earn, only being found off specific bug corpses and in little spots around the map. Charms have gotten a rework, and there's a bunch of new items and equipment that you can craft to use in your battles, and well, look, you're going to need to play it yourself to experience them all. Hell, I wish I was playing the game right now instead of writing this damn video. First off, the scenery everywhere in this game is so eye-catching and all around gorgeous, even more so than the first game, I would say. The colors pop. Every area feels incredibly unique, and the way that every location links together is similar but also very different than the first game, which had a lot of semblance to the way Dark Souls feels laid out. But in Silksong, the progression and connections between different locations are much more linear and feels like the levels from LEGO Star Wars: The Complete Saga. Don't worry about it, it's more of a makes sense to me type situation. But going back to the visuals, they cannot be understated. Every particle and parallax background makes everything pop, and there's not a single pixel placed anywhere that was chosen without the utmost perfection in design quality. And while in the first game, every area was easily recognizable from both their colors and level design, Silksong I feel does everything not quite better, but definitely different. Colors are deeper, locations feel more cinematic, and there's always something going on in each and every room. The sharp greens, rich reds, shallow greys, and much more are so striking. And I'm not a color theory scientist or anything, but this game is covered in that feeling you get when color combinations and theming is just so perfect. It's the same feeling that I get from playing Helldivers 2. Everything just feels right. And I don't know what else to say other than that. It's all beautiful. I'd love to talk about some of my favorite locations from the game, but I can't break my own rule number 1. So again, please play the damn game if you're not already doing it while watching this video. And for those of you that are playing the game right now, you better still have your in-game music turned on, because that soundtrack is banging. And speaking of the sounds, on the topic of the soundtrack, my oh my, I thought Hollow Knight's OST was iconic. Give it a while and people will be filling Silksong with glaze. The boss soundtracks are grandiose and thrilling, locations' themes are bright and curious, and some are bleak and somber. Christopher Larkin has come back to reprise his role as Hollow Knight's composer, and he has yet again blown everyone's socks off. And I don't even need to say anything, as he puts it best himself. Accompanying Hornet on a new journey through a vast kingdom, the music for Hollow Knight Silksong threads elegant melodies, exciting riffs, and atmospheric interludes through a handcrafted score performed with a roster of talented musicians. A symphony of silk and song. Man, where can I get the vinyl? And as for the sound effects, every enemy, player movement, and interaction with the world's objects is as crisp as ever. And especially with the new animations, doing the simplest task is incredibly satisfying to both the ears and the eyes. One big thing I was worried about was the chance of the NPCs being much less iconic than the first game, but every character you meet is both incredibly well designed and seriously well written. I'm not the biggest fan of reading dialogue, but it's honestly really fun reading every witty and silly line from all the NPCs. And the voice acting is really what puts the bow on everything. And sure, it might not be a or a
Bapanada.
or but man, do they hit different. Again, I'm not here to tell you which one is better over Hollow Knight or Silksong. They might be similar at their core, but they each do almost everything completely differently. It would be like comparing Half-Life 1 to Half-Life 2. At its core, it's tomato, but you cannot compare them as equals. If it still isn't clear to you, yeah, I think Silksong's pretty good, and I hope you share the same sentiment. And if anyone does disagree and calls the game mid, yeah, they're just rage baiting. They probably just rage quit the game after getting it on Game Pass and failing any of the parkour sections. But anyways, like and subscribe. I got a lot of videos planned, so stay hyped. If you're new, check out my channel. I'll definitely continue streaming my Silksong playthrough almost every day, so if you're interested, come say hi when I'm live. But other than that,